We'll just give folks a couple more, 30 more seconds to come in, and then we'll kick off. Because there are so many of us today, we are going to ask you to stay on mute, but there will be the opportunity to unmute and ask questions of our lovely guests, and I'll explain more about that when we kick off momentarily. Great to see some familiar faces. Good morning, folks. All right, so for the sake of time, we're going to kick off. Welcome to the New York Data People, Data Persons Community of Practice. For those of you who have not joined before, the premise and the purpose of this group is to give people who manage their school's data, both from a compliance and reporting perspective, but also from a data-driven instruction perspective, a community of practice, a resource of their peers, people who are struggling with the same things, who have maybe solved similar problems, who have approaches, platforms, tools, philosophies, resources that could be helpful to your fellow data persons. Today's meeting, for those of you who have joined in the past, today's meeting is going to feel a little bit different because we are so gratified to have Janet Klein, Ellen Martin, and Sandy Sheedy here from the New York State Education Department to talk about the new attendance reporting requirements that were rolled out in December in the context of COVID and hybrid learning. And so Janet and Ellen are sort of on the data side of the house. Janet's with the Charter Schools Office. Ellen is with the phenomenal data persons of SED. And Sandy Sheedy is the godsend many of you may have experienced in the child nutrition department, because there are some child nutrition implications for this attendance reporting as well. So we're going to start off hearing from them. Please hold your questions to the end. And then we're going to use the raise hand feature for people to unmute themselves and ask questions. So we do totally want this to be interactive, but there are lots of folks who've registered, lots of folks who are here already. And so that's how we're going to navigate that portion of the meeting. If we have time for other content after that, following up on our last month's meeting, we have some other points of discussion and some things we'd like folks input on, including around some high school reporting resources, which is something that we heard from folks that they were interested in doing a deeper dive into. And that is probably the most timely of our additional topics, because that reporting is due in August. And so we want to pick your brains about what timing would be most helpful in terms of teeing up those resources. So with that, I'll say again, huge thank you to Janet, Ellen, and Sandy for being here. And I will hand it over to you, Janet, to share your screen. So please, everyone, stay muted, hold your questions, and we'll take them at the end with the raise hand feature.
Hi, everybody. I'm just trying to figure out how to share my screen and what to share, because it's looking weird right now. I apologize. Thank you all for coming. Here we go. All right. Can people see the PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Okay. Let me turn it into a slideshow. There. Okay. So is it looking right now?
Looks great.
Okay. So thank you, everybody, for coming today. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm Janet Klein. I'm with the SED Charter School Office. We also have Ellen Martin, who is from the Information Reporting Services, and Sandra Sheedy from Child Nutrition. What we're going to talk about is the new reporting requirements. And what I really want to say is really all of this. This past year has been fraught, and we know that. On top of everything else you've had to deal with, we instituted a new data reporting requirement in December of last year. Not the best thing for you, we apologize. But It has to happen. The way that you need to report attendance has changed, and now it includes daily reports of both attendance and modality. For schools in the rest of the state, this was an additional requirement, but they were already doing SIRS reporting for their attendance, so it was a process they already worked with. For schools in New York City, there was a complete change in process from ATS with New York City DOE to SIRS with Eastern Suffolk BOCES. This change in reporting was necessitated by the federal government's new data reporting requirements for state education agencies, which is what SCD is. And the data will also be put to other important uses that will benefit students, and we're going to discuss that shortly. I really appreciate everybody who's here, who's taking the time to listen, ask questions, and help get this all right. So the agenda, here's what we're going to do today. First, we're going to talk about why we have to do attendance with modality reporting. We're going to touch on the 180-day memo that came out December 1st that generated lots and lots of interesting questions. Then we're going to talk about the 3 reports that need to be done: the day calendar, school entry exit, and student daily attendance. Together, all 3 of those go into reporting attendance. Then we're going to talk about the reporting process to level 0, regional information centers, RICs, those are your lifelines. Verification process in level 2, which is really critical. I'm going to go over the important takeaways from this presentation, and then I'm going to share some additional resources with you. So first of all, why do we have to do attendance with modality reporting? It's a federal reporting requirement for the American Rescue Plan. That's the $8.09 billion that SED is going to give to LEAs across the state of New York. Charter schools are also LEAs. We need to collect, report, and publish these modalities. Now, we are doing a preliminary publishing based on the school reopening plans that everyone submitted. However, the US DOE requires that we also report on what actually happened in 2020 and 2021. It's also possible that the US DOE is going to require compliance with modality reporting in order for New York State's LEAs to be considered eligible for their share of those funds. Next really important reason, the data will be used to calculate the pandemic EBT benefits for your students' families. Currently, the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance is using the school building daily modality reports that are being collected by the Department of Health to build monthly predominant profiles based on in-person, hybrid, or fully remote for each national school lunch program participating school for each month. If a school has not been reporting daily modality to Department of Health, there has been no way to administer initial benefits. The benefits for those kids who are enrolled in these schools are going to be contingent on SIRS attendance reporting. Also, at the end of the year, the SIRS reporting is going to be used to reconcile against what has been reported to DOH, which will hopefully increase the amount of payments to families. Throughout this presentation, you're going to see a bunch of these blue sections. These are links, and I'm sure that the New York Charter School Association will make available this PowerPoint presentation. So this is the link to the May 18th, 2021 memo that came out from Student Support Services at SED discussing the mandatory collection of this information. A third reason why we want this done is chronic absenteeism. So in the event that daily data for your students is missing, the default is going to be absence, which could result in 100% chronic absenteeism being reported for your school. And we really don't want that if we can avoid it. So the 180-day memo. On December 1st, the memo, and this is the link to the memo, was sent to all charter school leaders and superintendents of school districts and superintendents of BOCES and just about everyone across New York State who needed to receive it. Now, the following 2 bullets are direct quotes from the memo. The first, all reporting requirements and additional clarification contained in this memorandum apply to the beginning of the 2020-2021 school year in September. What that means is, yes, you have to report student daily attendance with modalities starting with the first day of school in September and October and November and December and continuing through the end of the year. And the last one, the reporting entity must be prepared to report the attendance, both positive and negative attendance by instructional modality. Now, when it comes to attendance, we realize that it's going to look different school to school. One school is going to count a student as attending because they completed their homework that was assigned that morning by a certain time that evening. Another school is going to consider a student as attending if they signed into 3 different modules throughout the day. Another school will require 5 or 7 different modules throughout the day. Everybody's attendance is going to look different. We know that. Nobody's seeking to audit the way that you are doing attendance. We just need you to do it and report it. And the very last thing, lots and lots of questions about SAMs, because it's included in the memo, because again, this memo didn't just go to charter schools, it also went to all these other folks too across the state. SAMs reporting only applies to districts. Charter schools do not use SAM reporting, so don't worry about that. You have enough to worry about. Okay, the reports. Now, this up here, that's the link to the SIRS manual. That's really the Bible when it comes to anything data related for SED. It's about 300 pages long. It's not something you want to sit down and read on an afternoon, but what I use it for is Control F and find. So, and there's a topic that I need to look up. That is my go-to, and that is where I get most all the accurate information that I can find. So there's 3 reports, as I mentioned earlier. There's the day calendar. This one has to be submitted first, and to the best of my knowledge, I believe everyone has submitted their day calendars already. This one should have at least 365, 366 for leap year records or more. There's one coded section on it. It's called day type. Information on that can be found on page 185 of the SIRS manual. The next one is school entry exit. This is a record of each student's entrance and exit from a school building. There is a reason for beginning enrollment code that's discussed on page 205, a reason for ending enrollment code that's discussed on page 207, and grade level codes, and that is discussed on page 219. And then the last one, really one of the most important ones, the student daily attendance. This is a record of each student's attendance and modality for each school day. So for example, let's say a school has 100 students and they have a 180-day school year. That school is going to report 18,000 records. On that, there's the attendance code long. That is discussed on page 255. And attendance instructional modality, and that is discussed on page 255. Now, the next 4 slides are really just an example of the template for those 3 different reports. This is the day calendar. The first column is the field name. So for example, you have identifiers, the district code. This is the district of responsibility code. The next column tells you why this is being collected, and this is New York State reporting. And the next column gives instructions or rules. These templates, as complete templates, are available on the IRS web pages. This one has location code, the building of enrollment, the school year date, school date, location grade level, and day type. The others are part of the template, but SED does not make use of them, so those are left blank. And that's the day calendar template. This is page 1 of the school entry exit. I couldn't fit the whole thing on one slide. It would have been impossible to read. So again, you have identifiers, the district code, location code, school year date, the student. Now we're getting into student level data. So now you have your student IDs, the school entry date, the entry type code. That's your reason for beginning enrollment code, enrollment grade level, and The rest of it is rounded out with the school exit date, the exit type code, and pretty much the rest of it is all left blank. And now we have student daily attendance. Again, identifiers, a district code, a location code, the student ID, the attendance date, the attendance code long, school year date, and the very important attendance instructional modality. So the reporting process for level 0. The student management system is really critical. And for schools who use certain student management systems, contact your vendor, because I have heard, I cannot confirm it, so you need to contact your vendor, but I've heard that they have created specific reports within their product for you to use. They might not be easy to find, which is why you should contact your vendor. Those particular vendors that I have heard may have done this are PowerSchool, eSchool Data, School Tool, and Infinite Campus. For schools with other SMS systems or no SMS, you need to talk to your RIC. Absolutely critical. That is the source of everything you need. So for all technical questions, contact your RIC. All of this reporting goes into through level 0 with your RIC. They are your partner in getting this done. I did provide a link to level 0 validation errors in case you're interested in looking at that. But again, this is all about you have to work with your RIC. And here they all are. These are all links to their web pages. You have Central New York, Eastern Suffolk BOCES, that's for New York City, et cetera, et cetera. You should already have a relationship with your RIC, and it's about to get stronger. Now, next comes the verification process, level 2. For the day calendar, you want to look at the SIRS 370 day calendar summary report. These are all links to the explanation of the report. These are not links to level 2. If you have trouble accessing level 2, talk to your RIC. For the student entry exit, only students with reason for enrollment codes listed below are going to appear on the verification reports. So you have your 11, the 22, 55, 5544, 7000, and 7011. For student attendance, from what I've been able to gather in my research, the one that you really want to look at first is SIRS 371, which is the student attendance count. It is described as your first stop priority when verifying attendance records were reported correctly or when troubleshooting attendance problems. Important takeaways. We're almost done. Reporting student daily attendance this year is incredibly important to your school and to your students' families. And if you haven't started yet, please start now. You want to get that information up to level 2 as soon as possible so that you can verify that it is correct. Work with your RIC. They are your best source of practical and technical assistance with this. And again, start now, get your data up to level 2 so that you can take advantage of the ability to verify your data in level 2. Additional resources, I linked to the SIRS manual again because I think it's worth 2 links. It's that important. It is the most complete resources for any questions about reporting. I've also linked to a YouTube tutorial on attendance reporting for schools that do not have a student management system. This was produced by Tracy Davey of Eastern Suffolk BOCES for New York City charter schools, but it might be helpful to others. It's 13 minutes and it's definitely worth your time. Level 2 reports. I linked to all of the webpage for SED that has all of the different level 2 report guidelines, just in case you'd like to review some of the other ones. And with that, I just want to say thank you very, very much for everything that you've done this year. The most difficult year I think anyone has ever faced. You are all very much appreciated, and I really do appreciate you taking the time today to be here with us. And I guess it's time for questions.
Awesome. So if folks have questions, again, please use the raise hand feature. I will also, there's one that just came through in the chat, and Janet, I will tee up a couple that we've heard in the past. So one is that if your school was not equipped at the first day of the school year last year to track both attendance and modality together, what would you recommend that schools do now?
Figure it out.
So like go back and to the largest extent possible, match up that any data that a school might have in order to recreate that information.
Exactly. And it has to be 100%. The default will be absence. If you don't report for students, do the best you can to get 100% of the days reported for each of your students.
Janet, this is Ellen. Can I just add that I believe that the reopening plans that all schools were supposed to submit actually described whether they would be operating remotely or in person or a hybrid approach. So I do think the schools have the ability to provide that information, even looking backward to September.
As Ellen, I agree. I think I think some schools were not, they were tracking modality and they were tracking attendance, but they weren't necessarily tracking them together. And so what I'm hearing is, to the largest extent possible, go back and recreate those records, recognizing that if you don't, it will default to absent, and that has negative implications for for your school and your attendance sort of statistics, if you will. So I think, Janet, following on that, another concern that we have, or that we've heard, that you sort of spoke to, is this idea of like, what does present really mean in a remote setting or a hybrid setting where 2 days a week or 3 days a week a student is doing work either asynchronously or synchronously, but not in person in school. What I heard you say, but just to sort of package it and make sure I heard it correctly, because we've gotten this question a lot, is present means whatever the school defined present as meaning in a virtual environment, whatever they have put in their reopening plan, communicated to families, held students accountable to, even if that's different across every single school in the state. Schools determine what present means on remote instruction days. Is that accurate?
That is absolutely correct. We understand it's going to be different for schools. It's going to be different depending on the type of day. We trust you.
Awesome. All right. And so a question that's, I will read some questions from the chat. So can someone clarify, is the student entry exit referred to the same as the student class entry exit report?
No, those are two different reports.
And Kay, if you want to unmute and elaborate on your question, if Janet's answer doesn't answer it, you're welcome to. And Kay also asked clarification on postmodality. Exactly what does that mean? So when I just used that phrase, I meant you're tracking attendance, but also modality. So it's not just Anna was present, absent, present, absent, present, absent. It was Anna was in person, present. Anna was hybrid or virtual, absent. Anna was, right? So tracking them both together. Typically, because there was no such thing as a different modality, it was just present or absent. And now it's both. And that is one of the concerns that we had heard from some schools, is that at least at the very beginning of the year, they were not necessarily tracking both together because people were figuring a lot of stuff out. So yeah, please, Kay, go ahead. I see your hand. Please unmute yourself and elaborate on the questions if we're not fielding them the right way.
Thanks, Anna. I really appreciate it. The both that I was asking about is in the modality we have to enter, there are 3 different modalities, right? Remote, in person, and then there is a modality that is actually called both. So I wanted clarification on exactly what both means in the modality, if that, does that question make sense? We have students who are learning remotely, but so we have students in the classroom who are learning in person with a teacher in person and a remote teacher who's also remoting in. So what kind of, I'm just, trying to sort through what exactly both means. Thank you.
Hi, it's Ellen. I'll take a try at answering your question. So the modality of both indicates the student is receiving in-person instruction and remote instruction within the same day.
Okay,
I
it
don't
sounds
know
like
if that's-
what you're speaking to.
Yeah,
So if a student is in the classroom and they have a teacher teaching remotely, is that remote or in-person instruction?
that's remote instruction because the student and the teacher are not physically together.
Got it. And so then to add one more complication to it, you have an in-person student who has a remote teacher and an in-person teacher in that same classroom, then that would be in person. Yes?
Well, they're being taught part of the day by their teacher who is remotely located and part of the day by an in-person teacher. That would be both. That would be modality both.
Got it. Even if the whole entire day they have two teachers, one remote and one in person simultaneously.
Yes.
Thank you. That's great. Appreciate it.
Maria, want to chime in? I see your question in the chat and your hand up. So feel free to unmute yourself and weigh in.
Oh, hi, can you hear me? Perfect. Yes, yes, I have the same question. I just want to confirm because I was told by bosses that both the status is when a student on the same date attends in the building at the school, and later on he goes home and he gets connected remotely. So we are going to have very a few cases with both the status for a student. I mean, it doesn't happen every day that the student goes to the school and then gets connected to remotely, right? So that's my. I just want to confirm that I'm right because we don't have too many cases.
I mean, I don't want to speak for Janet and Ellen, but if I had to guess across the state that would be a lesser used field. So, but I think that's okay. Like, I don't think the fact that it exists means that there's some expectation that you have some number of students for whom that field is both. Janet, Ellen?
We have no expectations. We just need you to pick one. And if a student is being taught during one school day, in part remotely and in part in person, that would be both. But again, we're not coming to this with expectations.
As good as you can get it for every student. That's what I'm hearing again and again.
Correct.
Awesome. So there is a question in the chat. Joseph chatted it to me directly, but I think it's a question that I can read out. And maybe Sandy, you can be helpful here. So when will the PEBT calculations be made? And when is the deadline for all student attendance records to be submitted to level 0 for those calculations?
The deadline is as soon as possible to give you time to do your verification at level 2. There's different messaging coming out. Yesterday I heard New York City DOE, I think it was July 20th, they want everything in level 0. I have heard Eastern Suffolk BOCES use August 3rd. All I'm saying is as soon as humanly possible so that you can get your data verified in level 2.
Yeah, and for PEBT purposes, OTDA has, their hands full with this. They can only administer, as many benefits as they can in a particular week based on their card vendors, et cetera. So they're starting with the New York City DOE students, the public school students, because they were transferred a file from them first. They've set up their, predominant modalities. What they did identify was that there was a number of charter school students in the Eastern Suffolk BOCES file. So some of you have been uploading some of your students, I imagine, but they were far from everything that they need in order to administer benefits. So what they're really going to look for is that reconciliation data from SERS. So it's really important that at this time you really focus your efforts on getting your students in there from September through June, making sure that the enrollment for each student is correct, that their addresses and guardians and every other item that OTDA needs to administer those PEBT benefits are correct. I'm assuming that they probably will not administer benefits to the charter sector until the end, it feels like, because the data is so inconsistent and not there right now. So I think that your students should, I don't even know what the timeline is going to be. It's going to be pretty extensive though. Benefits for the year will probably be administered through December 2021. I'm assuming, in order to get everything out to everybody. They're also going to be eligible for, I believe it's like a $375 benefit for the summer. So those benefits will also be added on to whatever benefits your students have accrued for the year. So, I'm not going to say that anybody's going to get anything in your sector before December. But make sure that you have all of your SERS data in there, and that is what will be used perhaps for initial and all benefits administered at one time to your students. That's how I assume they're going to do it, just for efficiency's sake.
Sandy, Kay asked a question in the chat, which Kay, great minds think alike, because I was gonna tee up a similar question. So my understanding is that families who received these benefits last year and got a physical card, those cards will just be reloaded. They won't receive a new physical card. And so if a family got their card last year, but they don't have it anymore, can schools be helpful in terms of directing families to OTDA? Like, I know when the cards came last year, there were some instructions. You had to create a login, for example. Is there a place that schools could be helpful, in this process to drive families who maybe had a card but no longer have it?
So yes, so that was the plan with OTDA, that the benefits will be administered on a card that was from last year. So where that will change is for any new enrollees, for sure. For students who were SNAP or Medicaid eligible last year, but who are no longer SNAP or Medicaid active right now, or when PEBT benefits are administered for that child, they will actually be administered a card. So those people will all get a new card. Anyone who's disposed of a card inadvertently or whatever, thinking it was a one-shot deal, will be able to get in touch with the call center, which has not opened its doors yet, in order to have a new card sent to them. So there will be a process for that. OTDA has not even really updated its messaging on its website for PEBT, what we're calling 2.0, which will be the current and the summer PEBT. So they're in process of setting up all those files on the back end for payment, and we'll very soon have up both the call center and their info and fact sheets. I would caution everyone though, to just kind of put the message forward to your families that patience is a virtue and that people shouldn't be just calling and inundating the call center with calls, because there's nothing anybody can do for anybody until those benefits are administered. And that will take, and I really hope that OTDA puts in its messaging the timeline that's realistic for what it's going to be, because otherwise that call center is going to be so inundated. They're going to try then to pass those calls back to us at State Ed to redistribute the questions to the individual schools. And that will be the biggest Megillah that we want to try to avoid. So we're really hoping that the messaging that goes out is really realistic in terms of expressing how much time it is going to take to get these benefits to the families. And with
And
apologies.
Sandy, potentially something that we can do later in the summer is host a webinar, whether it's for schools or for families in partnership with you all and OTDA, to provide a forum that could potentially, streamline some of that. Because I think, yeah, if folks are just answering helpline all day, then they're not, processing the benefits. D'Offrey, I'm so sorry. I've seen your hand up, not trying to ignore you. So you have the floor, my friend.
It's fine. All the information coming out is extremely useful. The question that I do have is in regards to the actual, I guess, reporting and how you would want it to be received. Is there going to be a template that we're going to be provided on how to input the data, or is it like an Excel spreadsheet or a printout of how our data collection provider, gives us? Would that be suffice? So my question is the actual reporting and how we should distribute that.
Technical questions like what you're asking are extremely valid and should be directed to your RIC. They are your source for everything technical when it comes to reporting STRS data. They will walk you through. If you happen to have a student management system that is one of the 4 that I mentioned earlier in the presentation, you should definitely be talking to them about whether or not they can make this super easy for you. If you don't have one of those, talk to your vendor anyway, because maybe there's another one who has worked on this. And then talk to your RIC. That is your source for everything technical on how to do this.
And we are aware of some RICs that have already been having conversations with charters about how to, sort of fit together the puzzle pieces of their student information system and the reporting. And I think in some cases that drove some of the updates to platforms. And so if for example, like we're aware that PowerSchool now has a workaround for this, and that's not something that you've talked to your PowerSchool rep about, it's highly likely that your RIC is aware and can potentially walk you through it. Joseph, I see your hand up as well.
Yes, hey, how's it going? I just want to circle back to the question. I'm not familiar with the EBT and the EBT and things like that. So are parents currently getting benefits, and these benefits will be interrupted until the attendance is straightened out? Because I've never seen the two interact before. I've been working with BEDS for the last couple of years for my school doing attendance. So now I see this tie-in that I'm concerned about. So if we get our, will there be any interruption with parents getting their benefits if we don't get the information until, the end of this month, beginning of July, if that makes sense?
I'll answer that, Joseph. So in the 1920 school year, when schools closed due to COVID-19, they were, New York State put in a plan to provide PEBT benefits for the months of mid-March through the end of June. Those are the only benefits that have been administered to date. And how we collected data for that was that the Child Nutrition Office reached out to every school food authority and asked them to submit data to us for the enrollment data per child that we transferred over to the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. For New York City DOE transferred all that data to us from ATS because that's where they had it. Now that may have caused some issues if people had not been, updating enrollment and that kind of thing, which is why I said it's very important that everybody make sure that their family data is correct and current in your RIC and STRS reporting. So people have not received any other benefits yet for pandemic EBT. Persons who receive SNAP benefits have been continuing their SNAP benefits, but that's totally separate from pandemic EBT. So we put in another plan, which was only for the 2021 school year. New York State put forward a plan that will provide benefits to students who are learning remotely So students who are hybrid and students who are remote, which is why it's important that you have those designations of where a student is on any particular day and how they're learning. So nobody has received in New York State any benefits for 21-20 or 2021 yet. They're going to start administering the benefits using the New York City DOE public school file. All of the other RICs have provided enrollment data to OTDA. Like I said, they had some charter data within that Eastern Suffolk BOCES, and of course in many of the other RIC data for the rest of the state, there was also charter data, but it was not complete for what they knew to be charter schools from the initial payments in 1920. So your opportunity to provide them with full data will probably be in that end of year SIRS reporting, which will be when they have the most comprehensive data for the charter sector to administer benefits. We will personally be again collecting data from the non-public sector, which we will have to collect and provide to OTDA for administration of benefits to that sector as well. So my assumption is that the way that it will go will be the initial benefits will be administered for the whole public sector, New York City DOE first. And then the charter sector at the end during SIRS reporting, you'll get everything. So you won't get an initial benefit. You'll probably just get the one benefit. The non-public sector the same. And after SIRS reporting, the public sector will get the reconciliation of benefits and any leftover benefits that they didn't administer in the first round. So that's how it's going to go. And it's going to take an awful long time to do that.
So I guess it kind of, for me, you're like intermingling the pandemic benefits with SNAP. I need just clarification. I'm missing. Are you seeing?
Sandy, if I could take a stab, just to go up to the 50,000 foot level, because what Sandy just laid out, it's super helpful in terms of the process. And so Sandy, you should correct me if I'm wrong here, but the PEBT benefits, so the pandemic electronic benefit card benefits are for students who would otherwise have been fed for free in schools in person. So it's totally separate from SNAP, but the people who are receiving those benefits often overlap, although not perfectly, with families who would be receiving SNAP. Does that make sense?
And that is correct. So
this is
benefits,
a new, different, separate benefit to reflect that families who have economic need to receive free meals at school were feeding their students at home for every day that their student wasn't going to school getting those free meals. Does that make sense?
No, that's correct. So if a family is eligible for SNAP and gets standard SNAP benefits, none of that changes. They continue to get that. When it's time for them to receive their PEBT benefits, if they have a SNAP card, that is where those benefits will reside. For somebody who doesn't have a SNAP account that's active, but has a Medicaid case active, that is where their benefits will be provided. And for students who have neither of those situations, they will either have the benefits administered to the card they received last year, or they will be issued a new card if they are newly eligible. And we're talking about, I don't know, I'd say probably 2.7 million children in New York State that are being administered these benefits. So it's a huge number of children. It's the majority of the kids in the state that will receive PEBT benefits of some sort. Does that make it clearer, Joseph?
Yes, it helps. I would love to read it, but it helps.
There are some, we can drop some links in the chat to the OTDA website that has some FAQs there, if that's helpful. Although, as Sandy said, you know, this sort of version 2.0, this new round, is still very much a work in progress. But there's good information on the OTADA website, and in 1 second I'll go find the link and drop it in the chat.
I'm sorry, one last question. Can we see what's being messaged to the families? Is there something, you know, some documentation so we'll know what the parents are receiving in regards to this?
Now, currently, I don't believe there's any messaging to families unless it's being done, and I think they're not doing it yet by the entities like Hunger Solutions New York and some of the advocacy organizations. So they tend to be the messengers to the parent population. At some point, OTDA will create the documents that will be the communications. When they send out their cards, they send them based on where they're issuing the benefits. So those are very particular to the student. And then they will provide to us some communications that we can provide to schools to use in order to communicate with parents. So those items are coming.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, a couple more questions from the chat. I'm scrolling back, folks. I didn't forget you. So for confirmation, this is from Seth. When is the student daily attendance due?
As soon as possible. New York City, I mentioned this, New York City DOE is messaging out July 20th. That's also in the chat. I've heard that BOCES is messaging August 3rd. SED is messaging as soon as possible.
Great. And then there was another earlier question in the chat. Where will this data ultimately be public? And I think I would also just say, can anyone look in their crystal ball about how, like, potential implications for any of this data? Like in the past, if you reported 0 attendance for your students, your school would be identified as chronically absent. That would show up on a report card. There have been rumors that this reporting might have implications for future title funds. Janet, do you have any insight into sort of standard transparency reporting where this data will show up and like potentially like post-pandemic implications?
Chronic absenteeism has been in the past and will in the future be reported in the school report card. There's nothing new there. If you're, whatever this year's reporting looks like, it's going to be there. So far as modalities, there is a new website under construction for the American Rescue Plan, and that is where this is going to be displayed. We are required to produce this website. We are required to publish this data under the terms of this funding.
Yes, and I would just add, like, nobody knows, right? And so if a year from now, there's a midterm election and the federal government wants to release a little bit more money for some, to help with the recovery, but also potentially for some political efforts. This is the sort of thing that might have implications for how funds are distributed. Knowing, so nobody knows. So it's a great reason to make sure it's as good as possible.
Yeah, we do know that tying it to eligibility for your portion of the $8.09 billion that we do know is going to be distributed to LEAs across the state, that is a very real possibility. It's just incredibly important that you report this. So that is not a 2-year down the road possibility. That's a this year immediate possibility. Just to stress the importance of getting this done and getting it done accurately.
Awesome. And Erin, I didn't mean to not call out and highlight and thank that Erin and Tracy, Erin from the New York City DOE Charter Office and Tracy Davey from Eastern Suffolk BOCES are with us. They have been adding some context related to Eastern Suffolk BOCES in the chat. And so, Tracy, Erin, just want to take a second and first of all, thank you for coming, and didn't in any way not want to give you your sort of moment of Zoom spotlight. So would love anything that you would sort of highlight, call out for schools in New York City.
Hi, Anna, thank you so much and Janet and Ellen, you're great collaborators. I really appreciate being here. I'm sorry to say Erin had to jump off. She just sent me a message a few moments ago, but we really appreciate hearing everything that our schools are hearing and to make sure that we can collaborate the best possible. And Janet, thank you for the shout out and sharing that video that I've created. We just answer questions. We set up as many resources as possible. We have lots of things on our website. Erin sent out a link to our website on the chat a little bit earlier. If you, I mean, it's a public website. If you are an upstate school, we actually have templates that can help you to maneuver data into the correct format for loading into level 0 with your local RIC. I am a project manager for state data reporting and meet with Ellen and all the other project managers, including my colleagues at the city, with the Department of Ed, to the State Department of Ed to talk about what's coming up and what needs to be done. So, and I collaborate with all of those project managers across the other RICs in the state. So we'll help wherever we can, but of course my focus is here. But if I can say, hey, go look there, I will say that, you know.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'll make one last call for questions. And then I think for the sake of time, we will wrap, but we will communicate out to the data community of practice, our next meeting, which will probably feel a little bit more like this and a little bit less like the workshop conversations, because like I said, we've been asked to do some, people had questions, school folks had questions about high school reporting, which will come up in August. And so we want to get that information in front of you all as soon as possible so that you can please be sure to take a vacation at some point this summer. For all of data reporting, vacation, close second. All right. Any other questions? And if not, folks can be on the lookout for a follow-up email with the recording and the deck. And if we can be helpful on this topic or other data related topics, please feel free to let us know. Thank you again, Janet, Ellen, Sandy, Tracy. Really appreciate your time and collaboration.
Thank you all for the opportunity. It was really nice to see everyone.
Take care,
Absolutely.
everyone.
Be well.